A week ago, the life I thought I had came to a screeching halt. After my dad and sister died in a car crash a few months ago, my mom thought that moving would help us get over it. It didn't. I never asked to move, never wanted to leave the few friends I had made over my time in that town. It didn't matter in the end. No matter how much I would protest, we still packed up all our things and moved all the way across the country to a small town in the middle of Kansas called Nachtbaum. Of all the states, it just had to be Kansas. It's always hot, making going outside miserable. Oh, and good luck getting something good to eat around here. The only restaurants you can find in this town is a sketchy barbecue joint where the meat is questionably edible, some Italian place with an owner who has the strangest accent, and the worst Denny's I've ever seen out in the farthest reaches of the town borders. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. My story starts about 6.5 days ago, when we first pulled into our new driveway. I slept most of the drive here, so I can't recall too much of the journey. What I can recall, however, is waking up to the oldest, most rustic-looking Victorian house looming over our little white Suburban. The house was clearly in need of some major TLC. The windows had plywood covering them, vines were creeping up the long tower that stood to the side of the building, not to mention the number of makeshift shingles I saw in the roof. Tarps and other planks of wood covered that could be assumed as missing patches of proper roofing. I was surprised we were even allowed to go near this place, much less expected to live in it. Naturally, I expressed my concerns to my mother, who was too busy trying to keep our bags from spilling out of the trunk to give me a proper response. I helped her tame our luggage before she told me to go check out the house, tossing me a small, rusty key to assist in legally entering the building. I protested in vain as she ushered me to the front door before running back to the car in order to begin emptying it. I let out a small sigh, flakes of rust dotting my palm as I look at the key. A deep part of me wanted to just throw the key away and run back to my old home. I just felt alien, like I shouldn't be here. Probably because this place probably has asbestos or something, I thought to myself. My mom shouting at me to go inside snapped me out of my thoughts, leading me to press the tip of the key to the door's lock. It took some finagling, but I eventually managed to maneuver the key inside and turn it, causing the old door to click unlocked. I took another deep breath before turning the knob and swinging it open, the door squeaking and groaning as I did so. The sunlight behind me illuminated the entryway that I assumed hadn't seen sunlight for many, many years. The floor was caked with dust and dead insects. Looking around a little showed me that to my right was a doorway, whose door was barely cracked open. To my left was an archway that had what looked to be an open space. Those were the only things I could see from the doorway, and I had no intention of actually entering that place. I began to take a step back, planning on just getting my mom to go in instead. Whoa, that place is nasty. The voice right behind me caused me to nearly jump out of my skin, my heart hammering in my chest as I spun around to see who had just spoken. The person who had been standing behind me was a dark-skinned boy who looked to be around my age. His black hair was barely noticeable due to it being cut so short. His eyes were brown, but something looked off about them, like they hid so much more behind them. Things I shouldn't know. He'd have a fair complexion if it weren't for the weird patch of pale white skin splotched on part of his cheek and neck. He looked like marble cake with more chocolate than vanilla. He was grinning, too. Oops, didn't mean to spook ya. He laughed a bit as he spoke, taking a step back of his own. My mother and I just saw some new people pulling into the old house across the street, and we figured we could introduce ourselves. Sure enough, my mom was talking to another woman. What I found a bit strange was that who I had assumed to be his mom was a taller, pale-skinned woman with long brown hair pulled into a braid. Yeah. I couldn't really think when I spoke, clearly making a fool of myself as the boy laughed again. I was too confused about so many things at that moment to care. So, you planning on going inside? He asked, pointing into the doorway behind me and into the dark house. I don't want to go in there. I turned, peering into the inky darkness that looked like it was a swirling void thanks to the dust being picked up. I'm pretty sure there's going to be black mold or something in there. Once more, he laughed. Oh, please. There only might possibly maybe be something hazardous in there. You never know till you go. As he finished speaking, he pushed the reluctant me into the house. It was so cold in there. I get how a house that was left unattended for years could be a bit chilly, but this was something else. I shivered as goosebumps freckled my skin. Sure is frosty in here, huh? The kid said, pulling out his phone and tapping it a few times before a bright light flashed, filling the darkness around us in a cone of light. There we go. That should help us out. As he held the flashlight in one hand, he began exploring, leaving me alone in the dusty entrance. I asked myself now why I didn't just run back out the front door into the car, where I could lock myself inside as protest. The only answer I can come up with is that there was another feeling stirring inside me. I felt an unexplainable draw deeper into the building. This caused me to pull out my own phone before turning on the flashlight. With my light now on, I began to follow the dark-skinned boy's path into the frigid darkness ahead of me. It wasn't difficult to see where he had gone. Footprints were left in the thick layer of dust that had formed on the floor. Little clouds of it were kicked up behind me before settling back down. Even with my eyes locked on the ground, I could see some of the more noticeable surroundings. The first room I had entered, the one on the left of the front door, had many white sheets draped over various furniture. I could easily guess what most of them were from the shadowed outlines. Definitely a couch and what looked to be an armchair were to my immediate left. The footsteps kept leading me forward, and I approached another doorway, one with the old door swung open. Before I passed, I could see what looked to be a lamp covered in white cloth next to it, where a corner would be. I stepped into the new room and was greeted with a checkered tile floor. It was blatantly obvious that this was likely the house's kitchen. My tennis shoes squeaked on the ceramic as my own steps matched the ones in my path. There wasn't much else I could easily notice aside from this another set of cloths that looked to be a dining set. I stepped through another archway that, when I looked to my right for a brief moment, I could see the light of the front door shining back at me. However, despite my exit being right there, the steps continued forward, and so I followed. Quickly, I noticed a step right in front of me, and after aiming my light off the weathered floor, I could clearly see a wooden staircase leading to the second floor of the house. The long handrail had ornate women carved into it, each holding up the ends. Their faces serene and calm as they bore the weight of the rail. Each step had a little strip of red carpet with green and a tan floral pattern on it. I let out a sigh before making the ascent. After I had reached the top, I saw no more footprints. I was confused, to say the least. Where could he have gone? I was too deep in to head back now, so my best bet would be to either find where the path resumed or to find the boy himself. With that in mind, I looked at my options for direction. Shining my phone to the left revealed a long hallway with about 2 or 3 doors lining it down it. To my right was another hallway, this one shorter and only having one door at the very end of it. That seemed like the place that a serial killer would be hiding, so I decided to take my trip to the left first would be the wisest. Not that any of this was particularly wise in the first place. I began my walk down the corridor, only getting a few feet from the stairs before coming across my first door. It was directly to my left and had a round bronze handle. It looked like it hadn't been opened in a while, but regardless, I was somewhat curious as to what the door had to hide. My fingers touched the cold metal and twisted, the door groaning open to reveal a bathroom. Luckily, it looked like it had been thoroughly cleaned before it became abandoned. The last thing I wanted to see was a nasty bathroom with grime older than I was. I took my first few steps in and was greeted with a large mirror reflecting light back at me. It was so covered in dust I needed to wipe some of it away with my sleeve just to see myself. There I was in all my scrawny, blonde, curly-haired glory. My round glasses covered my brown eyes as I looked at what I could make out in the reflection behind me. There looked to be a curtain to a shower, gently swaying. I assumed I had just accidentally brushed up against it when I had entered. There seemed to be everything else you'd expect in a bathroom. All the essentials were in various places around the room. I felt a small chill run through me, coaxing me to leave the room and head to the next one in the hall. This one was to my right and only a few feet from the last. Opening the door revealed an ancient-looking bedroom with a large mattress in the center, naturally covered with the all-too-common white cloth. There were more sheets hanging on the wall, hovering there like ghostly apparitions. They swayed ever so slightly as another chill washed over me. It must be a draft coming from the front door because I certainly didn't touch any of those. Quickly, I backed out and shut the door behind me. There was only one door left on the side of the house, and that was the one at the end of the hall. I approached it and turned the handle protruding from the door, only to find that it was already open. The force caused the entire door to completely swing open and reveal what must have been an old children's bedroom. There were many more linens in here. There was one covering something in the corner, more were covering the walls. It looked like an insane asylum. Normally, I would have noped out of there and just continued exploring, but this house was by no means normal. Instead, I felt a draw to a very specific sheet hanging over a seemingly flat wall. I couldn't help but give it a small tug, instantly forcing it to fall off of whatever it was holding up in the first place. My body and soul were wrenched in complete horror as that dreadful sheet fell to reveal Nothing. There was nothing under it. It was just hanging on a wall. Now, naturally, this was strange to say the least. Why would someone go through the trouble of hanging up cloth to cover nothing? Whoever used to live here must have been a total weirdo. Shrugging that off, a realization washed over me. I hadn't used my flashlight at all in this room. How had I not noticed the soft glow coming from behind a sheet at the farthest wall from the door? The outline given by the cloth caused me to realize that it was concealing what looked to be a window. I scooted my way over and pulled off that one as well, letting it flutter to the floor. I was temporarily blinded as more light pierced its way through the window, causing me to rub my eyes and blink a few times. There, staring back at me, was a face. Now, you would expect a face in a window. It's called your reflection. But what you don't expect is a face that is not yours, blinking right at you. I jumped and stumbled back, googly snapping my head to try and find what might have caused the reflection. There was nothing in the room or anyone else. Of course, turning back to see if it was still in the window yielded null results. It didn't take anything else to get me out of that house faster. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of that dreadful room, down the hall and the yawning hallway stretching out before me. The door at the opposite end of the hall stared at me, cracked ever so slightly. It was difficult to run down the stairs with my phone's light bobbing and swaying in my white-knuckled hand, but I managed it somehow. I bolted down the hall past the scowling statues that held the railing. The light of freedom shone only a few yards from me. I was going to make it. This is the part where you'd expect me to say, but suddenly the door slammed closed and I was locked inside. Ooh, spooky. That isn't what happened. Instead, I hurried outside, leaving the godforsaken death trap behind me. I stood on the porch, panting, keeled over as I desperately tried to catch my breath. It had been years since I was part of the track team. My body wasn't used to this kind of stuff. My lungs burned and my eyes welled with tears. I coughed a few times before I could hear some chuckling ahead of me. Again, my heart stopped and I jolted. And once again, that boy was standing there with that infuriating grin painted on his lips. I'd completely forgotten that I'd gone in there because of him. I didn't have the nerve to tell him off. My chest hurt too much and I was never good with confrontation in the first place. Instead, I just blocked out whatever he had said and walked right past him into my car. I know he said something. I saw his lips move. But at the same time, it was just unintelligible garble to me. I wasn't in the mood to deal with him. Strangely enough, my mother was in a better mood for whatever reason. Normally, I'd be yelled at for one thing or another, seeing as how I wasn't immediately helping her unload or offering to tour the house with her. Instead, she decided that we had a long enough day and bid our neighbors goodbye, likely apologizing for my behavior with some excuse about the move being hard on me. She scooted our belongings into the garage, which had been open in one way or another, before slipping into the driver's seat of our Suburban. "How about we go get something to eat?" she suggested, clearly trying to break the tension that had been building up for a while. I, still shaken and steaming, remained silent. She must have taken my lack of response as a yes, because she quickly buckled in and the engine rumbled to life. Something that might be perplexing to you is why I can see a house like this and be absolutely fine, but a simple reflection of somebody else in a window spooked me to no end. I can see why that would be strange. Surely, if I was scared of a reflection, a house that seemed to be created by H.P. Lovecraft himself would also chill my bones. The thing is, neither of those scare me per se. What did scare me, however, was whose reflection that was. It was someone I had known for a long time. My thoughts came to a screeching halt as the car did the same. We'd arrived in a small parking lot with only, and I counted, 6 places for people to park. Ahead of us was an equally small building with 2 large glass doors. Visible in the window was a flickering sign that read open, and another below it read eat.